Hi, I'm Helen Hebert, and today I'm going to show you how to make a paper weaving. It's inspired by a class I recently taught online called Paper Weavings, and I'll be offering that class again in the near future. Here's what we're making: a paper weaving with 2 circular sheets of paper. First, I want to show you the tools and materials. I picked up this book called Maps at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, and it's really cool. It's filled with a bunch of printed map papers, and it's kind of neat because they're perforated so you can tear them out of the book. And then it's actually 4, well, they're all different. The one I'm using has 4 of the same thing, but this is a larger map that will extend out. It's 4 panels. So this is going to go outside of the frame, but it just unfolds again. So they're large pieces of paper. So here's the map I decided to use, and this is just 1/4 of those larger sheets. And then I'm going to weave it with a Mingei paper. That's Mingei paper from Washi Arts. It's a Japanese paper. It is machine made. It's white on the back, and then it has this beautiful fibrous paper on the front. And by the way, I've put links for where to find these things in the original blog post, right under the link to this video. In addition to the papers, we'll need a couple of tools. I've got a glue brush and some PVA glue, scissors, an X-Acto knife, and I always have a pencil around, and a cutting mat. Mine is 12 by 18 inches. Now the first thing I'm going to do is cut my shape, and I was inspired by the circles here. I don't know if you can see them, but there are these circles. You can probably see this one. And rather than try to perfectly cut those, which I certainly could, I'm going to cut organic shapes. And you could make this weaving with any 2 papers. And if you wanted to give yourself circular guidelines, you could use a compass to draw them, or even trace circular objects like a roll of tape or a yogurt lid or something. So I'm just using that circle because it's going to be hidden when I start weaving, and cut out an organic shape. And then there's another one here. And so these are maybe 1.5 inches apart. It doesn't matter. There's so many jumping off points for creativity with paper weaving. And you'll want at least 3 circles, so 3 layers. You could do even more, but we're going to do just a basic. So I'll cut out the last one, and then I'll come back. So here you see my 3 cylindrical shapes cut from this sheet of paper. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the outer edge of my largest piece onto my second sheet of paper. I'm going to trace it onto the front side so that you can see everything I'm doing. In some cases you might want to trace it on the back so you don't have to erase any pencil marks. And if you did that, you would want to put it upside down, because we're going to weave those together front to front. So you want to make sure, because I've got an irregular shape, that outer edge and all of these edges are going to match. It's like putting a puzzle back together. So I'm going to take my pencil, trace the line. If this was a dark paper, that would be hard to see also. So you might have to use a white pencil, or you might have to trace on the other side. Or you could even use scissors or a knife and just cut carefully. So I've traced that outline, and I will now cut it out. You could use scissors or a knife, it doesn't matter. So now I've cut out that complete shape, and I can put my other one on top and make sure I have to just rotate it until I get it to line up. So see, they're the exact same shape. You can always trim later too if it doesn't work out quite right. So next I'm going to cut the Mingay paper into pie-shaped wedges, but instead of using a ruler and being perfectionist about it, which I could, I'm just going to cut irregular shapes again. I'm using this X on my cutting mat kind of as a guide for how to start, but again, it's really arbitrary. So here I'm going to cut a curve like that, and then I'm going to cut this into quarters, and then I'll just continue and cut. I'm going to cut 3 pieces into each, but that's also arbitrary. Could be 4, could be 2 or 5. Consideration is that you'll have to weave all those pieces in. So the more that you cut, the more weaving you have to do. Now I'm ready to weave, but I want to just point out that I've kept these oriented in approximately the same way they were with the top edges, because as I cut this up, it gets harder to determine how these are going to fit back together, putting that puzzle back together. So just keep that in mind. You could even mark your pieces if you want. And then I'm also keeping these pieces in order on the cutting mat so that they don't, so I don't misplace one and not remember how it goes back together. Because part of this is really weaving a puzzle. So now to weave. I've got the benefit of having some text on my map here, so it's easy for me to put my pieces back together, or so I thought. But you have to, if you don't have text, you'll have to have some other frame of reference. Here I've got a little point that I can see goes right into there. So you're going to put those 3 pieces back together, and then you're going to take one piece. I like to start at the top. So I'm going to take my top piece of my pie cutouts, and I'm going to weave under, over, under, and stick that in, and I'll try to figure out where that edge lines up. Okay, that's all really loosey-goosey. If I lifted anything, it would just fall apart. But as you start weaving, it'll start holding things together. So now I went under, over, so I'll go over, under, over, and I like to use my X-Acto knife for lifting so that I can get these pieces in. And then I'll slide that in as close as I can. I'll be able to adjust things as I go. I'll take the next piece. So again, I'm following, keeping them in order. And I do the opposite then again, under, over, under. And then I'll just continue weaving. Let me get one more in there and I can show you how it starts to hold together, I think. Over, under, over. So now that I've got that, I can pick it up and it's sort of holding itself together. I'll show you the back. It's just the back of the 2 papers. And I'll continue working my way around. So I have one last piece to weave in. It goes in here, but you can see it's a lot larger than it should be. So I need to go back and tweak my weaving and push things closer together, because there's some gaps in here that I can fill to make that tighter. And so I'll just work my way around. Gained maybe 1/8 of an inch so far. And then when I get there, I'll see whether I can fit that piece in. And if I can't, I can always trim it. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try it. So I wove in an even number, 12 pieces. You need an even number for the weaving to come out right. If I had 11, I would have had these 2 pieces touching each other. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, as you're working, once it's holding itself together, you can flip it upside down as you're working. So I still am missing some space. So I'm going to pull this. I think it's getting closer. You know what? I could futz with it more and make it fit, but I want to show you that you can just trim it. And these don't all line up nicely. Visually, I think that's okay. But if you wanted them to, you would need to keep working and get that to fit in there. But now I can take this and just trim that excess off. In some cases, you could also just trim a side, but then your edges won't match. So that's that. Next, I'm going to take my glue. This is a really cool applicator. I'll put the source in the links, and it's got a nice thin nozzle. And I'm going to glue the centers down first. Sometimes I like to work in tandem with a brush to smooth it out, stick it down. But if I'm working quickly or on a video where I don't want to take up your time or make this too long, I'm going to just go around and stick those down. So I'll continue doing that, and then I want to glue down on these edges as well. I will do a final trim, but I want these glued down in place first. So I'll glue all of those, and then I'm going to flip it over, and I've got to glue the points and the edges on the other side. I've glued everything down on both sides, the outer edges and the points, and now I'll just go back with scissors and clean up that edge, because inevitably there are going to be a few places where the weavings don't line up. This one doesn't even look bad, but I'll kind of follow the pattern. I'll trim it up, and it's good to go. My circular paper weaving. Please share this video link with your paper-loving friends and anyone else you think might enjoy it. Send me a picture if you make a paper weaving. I'd love to see it. And again, you'll find the link on the next screen. Thanks for watching.